There's no blocking between the floors. And what that causes is an easy path for fire. It would have went across the entire span of the attic, and then the house would have been a total loss. You're putting thousands of dollars into this house. Do your diligence. Get your inspections done. It's just additional protection.
So today we have Jordan Steward. He is a full-time Charlotte fire captain and the owner of Fireline Home Inspections. He's licensed in North and South Carolina. He leverages his background in emergency services, building construction, and providing comprehensive residential and construction inspections. Jordan, thank you so much for being here, and make yourself at home.
Yes, thank you, Dee. Thank you for the warm introduction. Excited to be here. So, where to get going? Hopefully, answer some questions and help educate people on the home inspection side of things. So, yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm excited.
I appreciate it. What sparked your transition from growing up in North Carolina to becoming both a fire captain and now the founder of your Fireline Inspections?
Yeah, so I remember specifically when it comes to the fire side, when I was in middle school, going way back, I started reading and learning about 9/11. And I will say that was really the catalyst for me wanting to join or do something emergency services related. The sacrifice that the firefighters, the police officers, first responders in general made on that day. Really, I mean, I was only 2 years old. Gen Z. So
Yeah.
I wasn't really around for that, or understanding what was going on. But just learning about it, reading about it, I definitely want to do something that was bigger than myself. So that's what sparked the fire side of things initially. At first, the funny thing is I wanted to be a detective. I told my dad, I was like, I want to be a detective. This is the only job, function or career that I was interested in at the time. And he was like, nah, you need to go the other route. So joined the Explorer program in Charlotte when I was 14, stayed in it all the way till I was about 18, applied when I was 18 and graduated high school. And I was fortunate to get hired at 19 at Charlotte. So that's what sparked that. And ever since then, I've just been, I enjoyed the job, loved the job. There's great people in it. Just a great career overall, just to find just that fulfillment from just the day in, helping those who are in need. Every job's going to have its ups and downs, as anyone would understand. But at the end of the day, I mean, you can't beat the job and the career satisfaction of the fire department. So love Charlotte. When it comes to the home inspection side, it was when I was transferred to a station. I didn't really want to be there, but I was transferred there. And it's an old 50s home. It was a temporary quarters for Charlotte that they kept. And they never built a station for it. It was Station 30 at the time, and it was an old 50s home with a basement. So that kind of, sets up this side of things when it comes to the home inspection. It was a slower station, didn't really enjoy it out there. And there were a couple guys who either owned businesses or they were in real estate. And there was a time when I worked with two of them for one day. They were on a different shift and they were real estate agents. And they were like, you should look into doing home inspections. Because I was talking about wanting to do something on the side because I was like, I'm not enjoying it here. I need to find something to do, find that fulfillment, just something you can work towards, enjoy, and make a little money doing it as well. So looked into it, and I definitely found the benefit of the home inspection field, learning about construction in a more in-depth way versus just the fire department, because obviously, we're going into burning buildings. So we have to know about construction. We have to know about framing, a 2x4 by this current standards is not going to be the same 2x4 you're going to find in an old 50s, 40s home. So learning about the dimensions, fire rating, things like that sort, we had a good understanding of that. But taking it a step further with the home inspection side, it definitely opened my eyes to a lot more related to that. So during that time when I was doing the training, I worked with my uncle who was a general contractor, picked his brain a little bit, worked with him a little bit as well on his projects. He was building like 4 or 5 different houses all at one time. So I got to do some inspections there, got to work with the HVAC and electrical contractors and the framers. There was one house that was pretty unique. It had all steel studs. So that was a unique one because, and this could go a whole nother direction, but when it comes to that, he actually had to go towards the commercial side of things for a residential house and get the commercial permits, all that stuff because of the framing. So that was a headache, to be honest. But got to inspect that as well. So yeah, I just fell in love with it. Got licensed early to mid 23, and then been taking it since.
Well, it's funny because how you answered that question actually rolled us straight into the next one. I was going to ask, how the background in fire and emergency services prepared you for being an inspector. And like you said, you basically had to learn building techniques and building codes so you could, identify structural and safety issues in this field.
Yeah, exactly. And then, sorry, I was probably long winded on that. But yeah, yeah. I mean, it was great, and I enjoy it because of that twofold benefit, as I mentioned in that you recapped was we learn on the fire side, we got to know types of construction, masonry, fire resistive, fire, or non-combustible, all the different types that we learn about in the fire side. But then also translate that now with the home inspection. Now I'm seeing the current standards and the current ways of construction, these engineered I joists, beams, some technical stuff, but still very beneficial for learning on the fire side. And then also when it comes to the home inspection side, when I'm on a fire call, if somebody has some issue going on, they can't figure out a gas appliance, or, the homeowner's freaking out because they smell gas or something, walking through the process of, hey, this is what you need to look for. This is where your shutoffs are at. These are the safety considerations to take into account. I now have a better grasp or a way of translating that over to a homeowner, whether they're purchasing a home or they're just, freaking out because, they're having some sort of issue and they call the fire department.
So help a consumer understand what goes into a standard home inspection.
Yeah, so the standard home inspection, we're going to look for everything that is structural, safety related, and then your main appliances, major things such as your HVAC, things of that sort. So from your foundation to your roof, from the HVAC to your electrical panel, we're looking for everything that's going to be a major consideration when buying a house, because you want a full picture, obviously, of what you're getting into, a true picture of the house. The best way I could describe it, and in North and South Carolina, we do have to be licensed, so there are some standards to follow. And I recommend, when you're buying a house and you're hiring a home inspector, become somewhat, you don't got to read the whole SOPs that we have, like in North Carolina, but at least have a general understanding, because there are some things that we don't look for. We're not looking for specialized things such as, confirming asbestos siding if you're buying an older house, lead paint. So there are some things that we don't do just for a general home inspection. Then there's some things that we do that you should know about. And I always, when I'm working with a client, I try to make sure that they understand what they're getting into or what they're, getting as far as a service. That way there's actually understanding. But for the most part, we're trying to give you a clear understanding of the overall picture of the house. And I compare it to, your primary care doctor. Your doctor is going to spend, obviously all day with you doing assessments, doing all these different tests. You're not going to do a stress test for your main physical. You're not going to do, testing for any allergies. You're doing just a basic assessment, right? We're going to get your vitals. We're going to get some lab work. And then if anything comes back from that, then we recommend you to a specialist. Same thing with home inspections. I'm coming in, I'm going to do a general assessment. I'm going to stress test your plumbing, but I'm not going to open up walls and check for things and be overly invasive. I'm going to get into your attic. I'm going to check and make sure everything's good with that. If I see anything that doesn't look right or isn't right, then I refer it to a specialist, and they're the ones that come in and they'll help you with the rest of the transaction. So that's the best way that I can describe the home inspection. I'm coming in as your physician. Come in, general assessment. Here's what I found. Here's when you look further into. I recommend you to your specialist, the electrician or the, contractor.
Now, I know this is kind of a weighted question, but how long does an inspection usually take, and should clients attend?
Yeah, so for one, I always recommend attending. Now, I do think that timing matters as well. I don't think that it's best for a client to be there the entire time. Reason being, it's a long, at least our inspections, it's a long inspection. So at least 2.5 hours at a minimum. I would say my average is probably about 3 to 4 hours, even for a small house. Reason being is I'm making sure I'm keeping tabs and keeping notes on things that I might find. That way I don't forget them. but, document, I have a set process that we do things. When I have my guys, same thing, set process. So as much as we want to educate you, when you're there the entire time, if we get distracted, there's an opportunity to miss something. So I always recommend coming towards the last half hour of the inspection. It gives you the client to come in and take your measurements, look at the house yourself. If you find something you got questions on, we can discuss it then. I found the best way to serve a client is once the inspection is done, we do a walkthrough of the entire house, outside and inside. And that way I can show you exactly what I found. I can show you the location of it. And then you have the report and videos for anything that's major. I take videos of the report once it's released. So you get pretty much two different ways of seeing things. You get it in person, live, you can see it for yourself, and then you're going to have it also in your report as well. So I found that to be the most beneficial. Everybody has a clear understanding, and I can also help them differentiate between what's going to be a major concern versus what's going to be something I'm just going to mention in the report because it has to be reported, or just something I want you to consider as you live in the house, because every house has little unique things here and there. And that's pretty much the best way that I found to walk clients through and to show them the house.
So, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see that people make during the inspection timeline?
During the inspection timeline, I think one of the biggest is waiting till it's too late. So, and that's more so, that's not really going to that's not really going to affect me per se. But when I talk to my, partner realtors and those that I work with and have a good relationship with, it can create a lot of chaos when you wait too late to get your inspection done. The report with us is going to be at least 24 hours. With the state of North Carolina, and don't quote me on this, I want to say it's 3 days. It might be 5 days that they have to release. Now, everybody, I think, across the board releases it at least within 48 hours. I don't think anybody wastes the entire 3 to 5 days, but still, due diligence period, especially in Charlotte, North Carolina, is going to be shortened. Competitive market. So waiting too late, I think, is the biggest mistake people make. Second is going for the cheapest inspection. Now, the inspection, granted, we're not doing work, right? We're not grabbing tools, equipment, making repairs. So as far as the value in that end, that's not really what's lacking. What is lacking is time. So when you think about just in the basic economics, you have an inspector, the cheapest one. In order to make what the inspector is, who might be a competitive rate or about the same across the board with most other qualified and good inspectors, that cheap inspector has to do a lot more inspections. What does that mean for you? Less time of your inspection. So that inspector, instead of taking those 3-4 hours, might be taking 2.5 hours. They might not be using the same equipment. If it's a multi-inspector company, they're probably not getting giving you the best services because they got to make up for those, that pay. So just basic economics on that end, that's what you're dealing with. Tools and equipment. That's the other thing as well. On our inspections, we use thermal imaging. That's included on every single inspection. And that's been a great tool because it helps us see any sort of insulation issues. If there's a deficiency between the attic R value, which is the insulative value, and then also the inside of the home, that could affect your energy bills. Big thing is leaks. You think about leaks behind walls. If it's been a steady leak over time, say in an older house, you want to see that temperature differential that might probe me to say, hey, this needs to be looked at further. I probe it with a test or a moisture meter, and then I can confirm or validate that concern. So I think it all comes back to timeline and then also, choosing the right inspector as well. And the other thing too is I think all clients should vet their inspectors. And what I mean by that is, are they somebody who is, good for you per se? So personable. Can they break down information for you in a way you understand? Somebody who might be, an older inspector who might not have any younger generation family members or things of that sort, might not be able to relay information as effectively to a Gen Z individual as somebody who's like me, who understands, how we talk, so there's that side to the gaps and understanding and gaps in communication. You want somebody who's going to communicate with you effectively, break things down for you to where you understand it. So that's the other thing I think is important as well, because at the end of the day, the way I see it is you're not just your realtor's client, you're my client as well. So teach that to all my guys too, is like when you have somebody and they're locked in and they're your client, that's your client. You're their resource. So if they reach out to you, be available for
I tell clients all the time, you're building a team. You're the boss. And what you're
them.
looking for are people who work well with you. And, there's enough real estate agents, enough home inspectors that if you find one that doesn't gel with you, find one that does. So, as a real estate agent, how can I better prepare clients for the inspection report so they don't panic over routine maintenance items?
Yeah, so I know with my agents that I work with quite a bit, like if there's anything major, I give them a heads up. So, and I will say there's two things that will, totally destroy a house. That's going to be fire and water. So anything within those two I guess scopes, I let the agent know beforehand, and I explain to the agent like, hey, if you see something like this in the red, is because it's got to this point. For the most part, as you know, with the inspection reports, most things aren't going to be that major. Things could be fixed, things could be remediated. It's not the end of the world. So as an agent, I'm sure you've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of reports. Really, just I guess I know for me, it's like they'll just reach out to me and ask me a question, and then I'll explain to them like, yeah, I mean, the way that I go about things is pretty much, for example, downspouts, that might drain by the house. Everything ties in together. It could affect your foundation. So this is something that we just need to do. It's a minor step. I think really just, I guess, the education or understanding of how the home unit works. And if you have any questions, or if an agent has any questions, I always try to be available for that as well to explain that. That way they could better prepare their client for, hey, this is why he brought this up, because it can lead to X, Y, and Z. Doesn't mean that it's going to be the end of the world, but we need to just prepare for that and, make sure we remediate it.
One of the ones that we have seen a lot and that we prep most of our clients for is there's going to be a light bulb out somewhere in the house. There's going to be a light bulb out, and he's going to say, you have a light bulb out. More than likely, it's a light bulb. But you should have the electrician check the light fixture to make sure that it's not a light fixture. Usually, if we're there at the end, we're going to steal a light bulb and make sure that the fixture works. But those are things. One of the other ones that we constantly go over is if you have faux stone on the front of your house, or you have stone sheets on the front of your house. The inspectors notoriously will always say it wasn't applied right, because according to y'all's standards, there's only one way to put it on. But the builders have to put it on the way the manufacturer tells them to. Otherwise, it voids the warranty. So those are two aspects where they kind of go head to head. It's like they're both right, and they're, it's not like anybody's wrong. It's just the builder has to do it the way the manufacturer says, and the home inspector has to call it out because it's not the way that it's supposed to be put on per the state.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. Going back to the builders, because that is a very contentious, atmosphere between home inspectors and builders. And quite frankly, I don't understand why. So there's so many components with the new construction, and like you said, manufacturer specs. There's tons of manufacturers now. For the most part, most builders might use, especially if it's like in a specific region, they might use like one specific manufacturer. But for the most part, there's tons of manufacturers. So, at least on my reports for pre-drywall, for final inspections, things that are come off to me as concerning, like I still call them out. But I also include a little bit more information about, I'm calling this out because X, Y, and Z. This may be correct based on manufacturing standards, but needs to be confirmed by the builder and have documentation showing that it is. And that's pretty much how I try to bridge that gap, where it's not so much like that's totally wrong, because it might not be totally wrong. It might just be exactly what the manufacturer specifies. So instead of me coming in thinking I'm some superhero, like, no, I'm gonna call it out for you because, because I see it, but, it may not be wrong based on the manufacturer specs. So just kind of do your due diligence. And so going back, and this kind of ties into your previous question about how do I prepare agents for, explaining to their clients. I try to be as descriptive as possible with our report writing. So we have things set up to where we don't just put like a simple sentence for most things. Let's something really, really minor, like, some paint that, might be ruined in like a living room or scratched or something. It explains itself. But for something a little bit more in depth, like I try to give, and we, in the home inspection field in North Carolina, we actually have a process called DDID where we have to describe, determine, implicate, and then pretty much recommend a contractor. So I try to pretty much follow that to where this is what I see, this is what it could possibly mean, this is what I recommend doing. And if you explain it like that, from what I found, most people, it takes the anxiety off of the questions of like, how bad is this? Like, is this something I need to really, worry about? Is it something I just need to be aware of? Like, it leaves too many open-ended questions for people who are investing $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, if not more, into a house and a property, and they're like, I just got a sentence saying this is wrong. So
this is their biggest investment. So when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars, you want to make sure you're making the right decision. And a lot of people will straight up ask you, should I buy this house? And even if you're not a handy person, you still can be a homeowner. You mentioned things like thermal imaging. Why should tools such as thermal imaging and drones be a standard for home inspectors across the industry?
Well, it makes our job a better service. So the thermal imaging, I mean, it's a great tool. Now, I'm not going to see behind walls. You don't see behind walls. But what you do catch is temperature differences. So, if a supply vent isn't supplying adequate air, I can use that to determine that. If I see some sort of insulation issue, I can find that with a thermal imager. If there's some sort of moisture concern or a major gap in the temperature difference, I'm going to see that, especially if it's something that might not be as visible to the naked eye. Because sometimes, more times than not, you can see if there's been a pretty substantial leak, because you're going to see signs of that. There'll be multiple signs. But for anything that might be a little hidden, or if it's somewhere in kind of a crevice, like say behind a toilet, you're probably not going to see it right away. Now, when you scan with a thermal imager, something's going to catch your eye and you can better investigate. So to me, it's just better for documenting. It's better for offering a service that at the end of the day, it's a visual inspection. Well, it just further enhances my visual ability to inspect the house by seeing the temperature differences. And then with the drone, I try to climb the roof whenever I can. I don't have a ladder big enough for a 2-story house. So instead of using binoculars or writing it off as, hey, it's a limitation because I'm not required in North Carolina to climb a roof, I'm going to fly a drone. And I will personally say I'm pretty aggressive with my drone. I crashed it once, only once. I'm pretty aggressive with it, and I try to get as close as I can. Now, I do prefer walking. I would never say that it's better than walking, but it does help as far as just offering a better service if I can't walk it because I have a big enough ladder, or if the slope is too steep.
Well, all right. So both of these tools, a drone is basically used even in a basic inspection, unless it's like a ranch home that doesn't have a severe pitch to the roof. And correct. There are people on both sides of the fence that if you walk a roof, you're causing damage, but it is the best way to actually get your eyeballs on it. The drone, people fuss because you're not walking the roof. So, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, some instances. But then you also have the thermal imaging. And it's funny because we were talking earlier about people that we know in common. Well, one of the people that we know in common, when they bought a home, and this does happen. In 18 years, I've actually seen it 3 times. And our mutual friend or our mutual acquaintance actually had this happen where when they're building the home and they were putting baseboards on, the nail gun pierced a water pipe because it was in the wall behind the bathroom. And nobody could see. There was no evidence. This was new construction. There was no evidence of a leak because the nail was holding the pipe and it wasn't leaking. but give it 7 months and all of a sudden it springs a leak. And then the evidence shows up. It makes me wonder if we were back then, if we would have, because thermal imaging is an upgrade. It is an additional expense. Makes me wonder if you would have caught that, because again, it was holding. It wasn't until later that the nail rusts out and the leak happens. So it makes me wonder if that would have shown up on thermal imaging.
That's a tough one to say, because if there wasn't that temperature differential because of the cold water still being in the piping, that'd be a tough one to find, I think. But, and you said it was for the baseboard?
Yeah, so it was backed up against the primary bath, and the baseboard was put on, and the nail pierced through to the pecs behind it. The cold water pecs behind it.
So there should have been like a nail guard there, which a pre-drywall inspection would have caught that early on. So anything within those, like I guess from the floor up to about 6 inches, needs to have that nail guard there to prevent that nailing from hitting the plumbing. So that would have came back to the pre-drywall inspection.
We would have had, I mean, because I highly recommend pre-drywall. You always want to see what's in the walls before. So I always tell people, I said, if you're going to skip one, skip the in, so typically when you're doing new construction, we recommend 3 home inspections. Pre-drywall, which is before they put the walls in, you actually get to see where all the pipes are, especially if you have gas in your home, because then you can take pictures, and when you go to hang your TV, you don't have to worry about piercing a gas line. Then we recommend one at the end, right before closing. That way you can make sure that if anything was done after the pre-drywall, you can catch it then, and then you do one at the 11-month, so you can uncover after a year's worth of the home breathing, living through all the heat cycles. You can do that. We tell, if anybody's going to skip any one of those 3, we skip the middle one, which is right before closing. That would be the only one that we tell you to skip if you have to. But yes, this home was found after it had already been built, and that they were only doing the blue tape walk, which is, just a visual inspection. So they didn't get to have the pre-drywall. They did have the inspection done before closing. But at that point, the walls were already there. So we weren't able, and again, with no signs, it's hard to determine, do you do a thermal imaging when there's no signs there? A lot of times people will choose a thermal imaging exam when they see a water spot on a ceiling or something along that line to make sure that it's not active.
Yeah. And our process, because like I said, we include it with every inspection, so it's built into our fee structure and everything.
So yours is included.
Yeah, it's included.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
So we just add it on. Yeah, because to me, it makes my service better as a home inspector as it is. So I'm not going to capitalize on using the tool, because the tool is it just makes my life better and easier as an inspector to visually check things and find any sort of leaks. Because last thing I want is anybody wants is a phone call saying there's a leak, drywall fell in. Like, if I can do anything to prevent that from happening, give you as much information as possible, just with the built-in inspection, like, I'm gonna do it. And so our process is pretty much, we run when we first go to the house, we walk pretty much clockwise. And anytime I come into the bathroom, we're going to fill it up as far as the sink, bowl, the tub with water. Not too crazy, but just enough to, drain it pretty good, test the drainage. So we run that. I typically start upstairs, run that. And the reason why I do that is because when I come back inside after doing the exterior, I could run my thermal imager once I'm done with the downstairs and check the ceiling to see if there's any leaks. Because if I'm running that plumbing beforehand, it gives it time, if there is a leak, for it to kind of build up and show itself. And then with that thermal imager, go around and be like, okay, there's a spot here that has grown, and I can call it out, probe it, test for it, and then spot a leak that way.
With us talking about your tools, we kind of went straight into what hidden issues can be uncovered with these tools versus a traditional visual inspection. But we also went into, why you need to do a home inspection on new construction. You talked about when you went upstairs into the bathroom. Most people don't know that a tub, a sink, all have two drain systems. They have an emergency drain system, and then they have your regular drain system. And so you guys go in and make sure that you test both. That way they can make sure that not only the main system, if it is clogged, has a way of emptying should it overflow, but that way, especially during new construction, that there wasn't something accidentally spray foam or anything put into those drains, so you don't have an issue later. We as real estate agents tell everybody to get a home inspection even on new constructions, because a lot of people are like, well, it's a new construction. It had to pass all of the, state inspectors. Why would I get a new construction home inspected before we close on it? And ours is, a home is built by human beings, and everybody makes mistakes. What is the reasoning for, besides the fact that, you guys need to do the job, but why do home inspectors say get a home inspection even on new construction?
So I'm kind of excited about this because I recently did a home inspection. This was a custom build. So it was a bigger house, really, really nice house, like pretty much a huge ranch. And I got to the last attic section, and I turned to my right, and I look over, and I see from the foundation all the way up into the attic, and they got spray foam insulation everywhere. So to the untrained eye, that probably isn't anything crazy. Like, okay, just, the joke was made like, oh, probably just some storage. Like, no, you need to have fire block in there, because what you basically have is how they built back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, balloon framing, where there's no blocking between the floors. And what that causes is an easy path for fire. If something were to start anywhere in this area, and you remember South Park, the fire down in South Park? So that spray foam insulation is what they were putting up in those buildings in South Park. And you saw how fast it caught on fire and burned the entire structure down. Same thing would have happened to that house if something were to catch fire in there. It would have went straight up because smoke travels up. It would have went across the entire span of the attic, and then the house would have been a total loss. So just that component alone, really simple, because all they had to do was put some blocking in there. Like, it was nothing crazy. But you think about it sitting there 5, 10 years, things get older, maybe a defective wiring issue, or, something happens, God forbid, that can totally destroy the house. And so when that was presented to the builder was flabbergasted by it. Like, I can't believe we missed it. I can't believe the county inspector missed it. I can't believe the contractors coming in and working on the HVAC system and everything else missed it, and they got it fixed. So, and it's not to blame anybody per se. I mean, if something needs to be there, absolutely. And I'm not saying that somebody was negligent, but it was overlooked. And so having that additional inspection can cause dividends as far as safety, as far as maintaining your house and keeping it safe, and to make sure things are done correctly. So like you mentioned, you're putting thousands of dollars into this house, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, this is going to be your biggest investment for most people, the majority of us. Do your diligence, get your inspections done, get somebody you trust to come in there and look at it, and ensure that you're taking the right steps towards home ownership and things are done correctly. I mean, it's just additional protection.
Homes are built by human beings, and we all make mistakes, and especially when you're building a home, most builders have one guy, your building superintendent, who is watching all the other trades. And as the trades come in, each time the trade comes in, they could be, I'm only for electrical. And so the trade saw this flue, for lack of a better word. It's basically just a hole straight up through all the way to the attic. So it is a perfect path for a fire to be able to travel to the next level. So you want to, the reason that you talk about fire blocking is because you're trying to keep fire contained to where it's at. So there's as little damage as possible, because the two things that kill a home faster than anything else is water and fire. And so they're built by human beings, and these little things, the electrician comes in, that's not my job. The plumber comes in, that's not my job. And he never informs the superintendent. If the superintendent misses it, the framers are the ones who are supposed to catch it, but that's two people out of all of these trades who are coming through. And that's why you have a home inspection, because they're looking specifically for those things.
Yeah, and what I've noticed too, and I actually thought this was pretty good and pretty neat, because again, I'm not contentious, or I'm not, somebody try to fight the builders, but if there's something to advocate for my clients, I'm gonna advocate for my clients. And so there's a couple times like I'll kind of be a little bit more adamant about something, like, nah, like I'm gonna recommend this gets corrected. But there's things called tolerances that builders stick by. And everything is engineered. Everything is already pre-planned for, especially for the bigger builders. So they already have, a set guide they pretty much follow. I like having the conversation with the builders on site when they show up, because a couple of times, the last couple I've done, they actually did the pre-drywall walkthrough while I was doing the pre-drywall inspection. So as things come up, I can pause for a minute. If they're in my area or the builder's kind of around, I can be like, hey, let me ask you about this. Has this anchor bolt been replaced? Is it, in the plans to be remediated because it's too far from the sill plate, or it's, not within 12 inches of the end of the sill plate? Like, what are your guys' tolerances? What is the, the set plans? Because sometimes you can't access the plans, but most times you can. But it is good because they obviously are building those houses all over the place throughout the entire community. They could be a quick aid to know what their plans are specifying. And then also, too, if something were to be brought up or mentioned, like, hey, I saw this, this needs to be corrected, then most of the time they're like, oh, yeah, gusset plate pulling. We're going to get the engineer out there, sign off on a repair, and get it repaired. So it just makes that part easier. Then they also build trust with you. So now they share a little bit more about this is what the plan is for this. Like we had a cool basement that they were putting in one of the houses I was looking at, and they walked me through pretty much everything from how trying to get the specific plans for that house was stressful because of the grade, and they were having to remediate this. He said, and by the way, we're doing this already, so I noted this part for you. If you want to note it for your report, you can, but just so you know, I got this working on or worked on. So a lot of the builders, they want to do well, and they want things to be good for the client. They don't want to just overlook things and let things go. So, when you build that partnership, it makes things easier across the board, and you become pretty much a liaison for the client as a home inspector. So, I could discuss with them, this is what, they're fixing. This is what I'm calling out for you. And we had the discussion, pretty much just keep documentation and make sure that they, tell you that they did it. And then if any of the questions come up, reach out to me. It's pretty much, that's been like the perfect flow for making sure things get done and that there's no issues or hiccups with the building process.
So since you brought that up, what are some of the most frequent structural defects or overlooked safety hazards that are found in new construction here?
And so like the pre-drywall?
Yeah, just what are some of the things that you notice that you keep seeing over and over and over again?
So framing, I think, is always one of the biggest things. So I definitely seen like sill plates and anchor bolts that aren't, tightened, or they're not spaced properly. It needs to be between anywhere 4 to 6 feet from each other from the next one. It has to be 2 per plate. So I commonly see things like that and call it out, and then they get it fixed. Sometimes they already have it fixed. You just got to verify it with them. But I've definitely called numerous times where the sill plate isn't properly installed. Sometimes when you have the plans in hand, they're missing a fixture somewhere. They're supposed to have a fixture. And so things like that, overlook stuff. Trying to think what else.
So some of the we see is like the wrapping inside of windows, so they don't bring the wrap all the way inside.
Mm-hmm.
Or, again, you talked about fire foam or fire blocking. You'll see holes, places that fire foam should have been put, and they're not, and it's not there.
Yeah, and we talked about the nail guards, so like stuff like that, making sure the wiring has proper nail guards, has to be within an inch of a quarter of the wood for the stud that is going through. It has to have a nail guard. Same thing with the plumbing. So checking for all those things. We commonly see a nail guard that's missing, here and there. Electrical, don't see a whole lot. And when the pre-drywall is going on, they normally don't have the panel set. They're not gonna have the panel set. So um, I I say they've been pretty good with that. One thing I have found, now that I'm thinking about it, is they'll have. I did find a couple times where the HVAC, the air conditioner or condenser, is undersized for the breaker. So the breaker will be like a 30 amp. It has to be like a 25 amp. And I've seen that quite a few times where they have the wrong breaker for it. So that can cause issues as far as, overpowering the unit. And so I did see that quite a few times, which is interesting because it's like that one overlooked thing when they purchased the equipment and the appliances that they just, you know, overlooked. But I have seen that a couple times. Say that again.
How do you, as a fire captain, how does your fire captain experience influence the way that you evaluate a property for safety?
Yeah, so obviously I'm looking more so for, well, I mean, it's honestly still both because you think about still if there's water intrusion, for example, say that like a sprinkler head in an apartment building were to bust, now you have the risk of not only flooding but also fire because it's coming down, wetting the fixtures, wetting the electrical lines. That can cause a fire as well. So, I mean, you have a general understanding of the concerns when it comes to just those two factors to consider. Electrical panels that are improperly wired, blown receptacles because they're overpowered. Power strips, I think, is going to be the biggest one for on the fire side of things that we see using this permanent wiring. You have just cords hanging everywhere, and they're using that to power appliances, stuff like that, scorch marks. So you kind of you notice those things a little bit more. HVAC, you know, they don't clean their filters. It winds up causing backups, and then that water, they don't have a pan in their attic. It can lead to flooding down below in the floor below. Then it wets their electrical line. So, like you see, just everything ties in together, and you have a better understanding of that. I think the fire captain side of things comes really in benefit for commercial. So, like doing now that I'm doing commercial inspections as well, it really helps with pre-planning for things, understanding different hazards. For example, funny story. I just did a commercial inspection this past week, Friday. Did the inspection Friday. It was a six building, like a commercial flex. So they had businesses, so like 24 different businesses, and I inspected each and every one. Took all day, but did the inspection. I released a report yesterday. So I finished it yesterday, released it to the client, and he called me up and he said, "Hey, so this unit here, like it was like one of the last units I did actually that day. And I noted like numerous electrical issues because they had a panel that had open knockouts. They had double tapped wires going into breakers. They had one of the wires was pulled out and just kind of hanging as like, or not pulled out all the way, but it was getting close to being detached. So there was numerous things I called out with that just as a safety. She said, yeah. He said, yeah, that unit caught on fire and they had a fire Saturday.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah, well, that's the one I was saying was like the major issue. He said, I was like, what caused it? He said, well, one of the light fixtures, overheated, wound up sparking a fire in the wall, and then it wound up, causing it overnight. He said, I think just the unit got damaged, but again, commercial, getting those inspections done is important as well. And you know what to look for and what to call out on the fire safety side of things because things like that could happen.
So, given your background as a hazardous materials technician, what specific environmental or air quality concerns are most prevalent here in our Carolina homes?
Yeah, so worked in hazmat for a few years and always enjoyed it. And I guess the biggest skill would be learning how to identify when something is of concern. So, like fungal growth, air quality testing, and how to test for it. I would say that's probably the biggest thing in the Carolinas that people are concerned with. I recommend getting done, especially if you're sensitive to, those specific allergens. The air quality testing, again, just a better way to get a full understanding of what your air makeup is. It could be 101 different things, to be honest, as to what is causing that. It could be poor, sealing of the home where outside air and mold spores are coming in. It could be from the vents. If the vents aren't clean, your supply ducts aren't clean, they're dirty, it could be circulating those mold spores. If there's a backup, you don't change your filter. Well, that backup causes condensation buildup and a slow of airflow. So that condensation buildup can cause mold spores as well. And then you're just circulating that. So it could be 101 different things. A big one I found recently was, well, not even recently, you find it all the time, is people don't use their fans in the bathroom. Well, you're taking a hot shower and you got all that steam going. Well, what are you creating? You're creating a nice, moist environment, damp environment for mold spores to grow. Because mold is everywhere. You're going to come across mold spores. It's like dust. But the big thing is, if you prevent moisture from accumulating or from growing them, you avoid the whole problem altogether. So fix the moisture problem, you fix the mold problem. And then at that point, it's just cleaning. So find that quite a bit too, as far as just surface fungal growth and mold on new construction, wood. They leave it outside, especially if it's been wet, raining, things of that sort. It winds up growing those spores. The big thing with those is get them cleaned. If they get cleaned before you put the drywall up, there's nothing to be concerned about. I mean, it winds up fixing itself. That's something we find too quite a bit.
So when we're looking ahead, looking beyond 2026, how is the home inspection industry expected to evolve with new building codes and technologies?
I think you're seeing home inspectors become more, I don't want to say specialized, but more validated. It's not just somebody's dad coming in with a screwdriver and a flashlight and, just calling things out just because. I think you're seeing we're overall as an industry maturing, and as a group, just across the board, we're getting better at, understanding and applying, codes as needed when it comes to just understanding what to call out, understanding new construction, what's going up now, and then also just providing a better service, I think, overall. I would say, and I can say this because this isn't my only field. I work in the fire department. So, that's my main job, home inspections, because I enjoy it. But I think we are seeing a lot more, good inspectors coming into the field and those who are actually doing a good job and learning. And I think the education is definitely skyrocketed just from when I started doing it. So I think you're seeing a better industry and a better service for people across the board who are buying homes.
So what are your long-term growth plans for Fireline inspections? What do you see Fireline doing in the Charlotte and York County markets over the next few years?
Yeah, my long term goal is to get those good people coming in, the home inspection industry. But seriously, my whole goal is to grow a team. Really, I would love for first responders to get into it. Those of the same similar background, because it's a great field to just, like I said, you learn on the fire side, you learn on the home inspection side. They kind of work hand in hand together. But providing that first responder service through a home inspection for those in our community. So just another way of giving back, helping educate those who might not have owned a home or have worked with their hands before, understanding, how to remediate simple things. We talked about gas at the very beginning of, this podcast, knowing where your shutoffs are at. So education, I think, is going to be the biggest thing that I try to push for when it comes to our home inspections. And I want to build a team of those who are willing to do that and help educate their clients, provide a good service, and then provide that first responder feel to every inspection.
Jordan, thank you so much for your time today. I greatly appreciate you. We have all of Fireline's socials, all of your socials. We will be putting this out for everyone to be able to get a hold of you in the future. That way we can spread your name all over the Charlotte metro region. Thank you again so much for your time. Thanks for joining me on Make Yourself at Home. I hope you found insights and inspiration to help you navigate your real estate journey with confidence. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, and share this show with your friends because everyone deserves to feel at home. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and keep making moves that matter.